Welcome back to FSD TV. I'm your host, Mark Sonny, and we have returning with us Sarah Spero, who's going to talk today about 5 people who changed the world. I can't wait to find out. Sarah, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Miss Spero, and I'm here today to teach you about 5 people from history whose lives have taught us a lesson. And I'm going to be sharing their stories from this book called Resist by Veronica Chambers. It's 35 profiles of ordinary people who rose up against tyranny and injustice. But we're going to focus today on these 5. So we're going to start way back, a very long time ago in 1429 with a personal favorite of mine, Joan of Arc. I am not afraid. I was born to do this. Joan of Arc was born the daughter of poor farmers in France. At that time, her country was in the middle of what would come to be known as the 100 Years' War. Imagine what it was like to live in a country that had been at war for that long. It would mean that the fighting started when you were a little baby, and that it would not end until your grandchildren were born or longer. Nowhere you lived or worked would be safe. Soldiers would fill the streets of your town. There would be no end to the death you witnessed or to the injuries the people you loved might sustain. When Joan was 13, in the midst of the 100 Years' War, she began to have visions. In them, she saw herself speaking to the leader of France, Charles, the king's son. She dreamed of riding a horse into battle and helping to end the war. Joan believed that these waking dreams were divine messages from St. Michael and St. Catherine. She said that the saints told her she would play a role in saving France and urged her to seek an audience with Charles, who had been named heir to the throne. A lot of people thought Joan was crazy. How could a teenage girl win a battle that grown men had fought and lost for decades? How could the daughter of a poor farmer possibly have advice about how to run the country for the son of a king? But Joan was resolute, which means she was fiercely determined. She imagined herself in battle and she knew she would be victorious. She said all battles are first won or lost in the mind. Joan envisioned her future, then moved forward bravely to turn her dreams into reality. She went to see Robert de Baudricourt, a local leader who supported Charles. At first, he did not know what to make of her, a teenage girl who professed that she must see the man who would be king. But with the village's support, he gave Joan his blessing. She cut her hair short and dressed in men's clothing. On horseback, she made the 11-day journey across enemy lines to Chinon, where Charles's court resided. But before Joan was allowed to meet with him, she had to overcome one more obstacle. Charles devised a test. He would dress in common clothes and stand in a crowd of men. If Joan could pick him out of the crowd, he would grant her a meeting. Joan lived at a time when there was no photography or technology of any kind, and Joan was poor. She had never seen an oil painting. There would have been no way for her to know what Charles VII looked like. Yet she was able to pick him out of the crowd. This led Charles to believe that perhaps there was something divine about Joan, and thus perhaps there was a purpose to her mission. She met with Charles and convinced him he needed to take the oath to be king as soon as possible, that the future of France depended on it. She also convinced him to give her a horse and armor and let her ride with the soldiers into battle. It was an incredible request, one that no one would reasonably grant. Men fought wars, women did not, but Joan resisted the constraints of her time. Charles allowed her to ride into battle. Joan triumphed in the siege of Orleans, and when Charles VII was crowned King of France, she stood by his side. In 1430, Joan was sent into battle again. This time, she fought against the Burgundians. There, she was thrown off a horse and captured. She was held for several months as her captors tried to sell her off to England. The British thought it might make good propaganda to parade her, the teenage savior of France, into their prisons. Her captors interrogated her, but she never revealed any of France's secrets. They threatened her for months on end, but she resisted. She tied her uniform tightly around with dozens of cords. So in this lesson of Joan of Arc, we can ask ourselves, what was I born to do? So Joan knew at a young age that she was born to fight in this war, to win the war that had been a part of her life. And she fought that war. And we're going to move now to 1892 to read a story about Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells, when she was just a baby, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the enslaved people living in the United States. Ida was 6 months old, which meant she was born a slave but did not grow up one. That made all the difference. Those years after slavery, known as the Resurrection Era, was very difficult for Black Americans. The South had fought and many of its men had died to protect the institution of slavery upon which its economy had been built. They had little practice in seeing people as fellow human beings with basic rights. When just a short time ago, a white man could own a Black person and make him work on the farm much the same way one might own a farm animal. Now, though the law now forbade it, many white Southerners continued to treat Black people like animals. When she was a young school teacher in Memphis, Ida experienced the brutality of the Reconstruction era firsthand. She was riding in the ladies' car of a train when a white conductor insisted she give up the seat she had paid for. She refused. She had purchased a first-class ticket for the ladies' car and did not want to ride in the crowded car at the back of the train. The conductor and 2 white men dragged her from the train. It was wrong. Ida refused to accept the discriminatory treatment. She wrote about her ordeal in The Living Way, a Black church weekly. Her article was read all throughout the city of Memphis and beyond. And it was that writing, the writing that she did, that helped give a voice to her story and helped people all over learn why it was important to treat all people fairly. So her life teaches us that when we speak and write our truth, things change. That justice thrives in silence, so it's important to say your truth. So she was a writer from a long time ago too, 1892. And then we're going to move to 1942, which is almost 80 years ago, for Headey Lamar. Headey Lamar, she teaches us how important it is that every solution begins with the question, what if? So Headey Lamar was an actress, and she made a scientific discovery with coding. So Headey Lamar, as a girl, she walked the woods of Vienna with her father. He was curious about everything, and together they would have long discussions about topics ranging from printing presses to streetcars. He taught her to love questions, to dig underneath everything she saw, if only with her mind. When she grew up, she became an actress. Where she worked, the movie studio where she worked, MGM, declared her to be the most beautiful woman in the world. But she didn't care about surface beauty. She declared, any girl can be glamorous. All you have to do is stand still and look stupid. In the middle of World War II, she wanted to do something to help fight against the Nazis. She had always been a tinkerer. She had always been someone who loved questions. So she asked her friend to help with an invention. Together, they created a device that would jam radio signals using a technique called frequency hopping. They patented the device they used, the device they created using mini piano rolls, and gave it to the U.S. Navy. So from a movie star to a brilliant scientist, her life teaches us that every solution begins with a question, what if? It's that imagining that there's a solution possible. And now we're going to move to 2009, and some of you may have heard of this young girl. Her name is Malala Yousafzai, and when she was 10 years old, the Taliban, a hardline fundamentalist group, came into her village in Pakistan and forced the school her father had founded to close. Her father was determined that she would have the same opportunity for education that her parents did, but the Taliban saw things differently. They banned girls from attending school. Activities such as dancing and watching television were also outlawed, In the end, the Taliban closed 400 schools. With her father's encouragement, Malala began to stand up to the Taliban. As with Ida B. Wells before her, journalism became her microphone. "How dare the Taliban take away my basic right to education," she once said on a Pakistani TV. So we learn from her life that you are never too young to stand up for what you believe in. And then I want to just introduce one more person to you from just a few years ago, 2016, Anastasia Somoza. And she teaches us that when you know in your heart, you can. When she was just 9 years old, Anastasia Somoza got an incredible opportunity. She was invited to visit the White House and meet the president. Why? What would you do with that opportunity? What would you ask the President of the United States? For Anastasia, the question she wanted to ask was very clear. Anastasia and her twin sister Alba were both born prematurely with cerebral palsy and spastic quadriplegia. Anastasia was verbal and able to move quickly into the mainstream classes. Alba, who could not talk, was shuffled into special ed student classes and denied the education she deserved. Anastasia asked President Bill Clinton to help her get her sister into mainstream classes. 2 years after Anastasia's White House visit, and as the result of the tireless work of her and her parents, Anastasia achieved their goal. Alba, who used computers to speak, was placed in a regular class. It was the beginning of what Anastasia called our inclusion revolution. Anastasia became a tireless advocate for disabled people from that point forward. She pushed herself to achieve all that she could so that others could look at her and see not her disability, but her profound talents and abilities. Anastasia went on to study at Georgetown University and the London School of Economics. Being quadriplegic did not lower her bar for what is possible. She worked with the Clinton Foundation on an initiative to end the abandonment of babies with disabilities in China. She scaled the Great Wall of China both literally and figuratively. Anastasia's sister thrived too. Former President Clinton attended her high school graduation. Through a groundbreaking therapy program, her communication skills improved dramatically. She studied at Queens College and the Met, New York's famous Metropolitan Museum of Art. Alba is now a visual artist, gives tours at the Met, and teaches art to kids of all levels of ability. For both sisters, the mission was clear: close the ignorance gap around people with disabilities, and the realm of what is possible is thrown wide open. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thank you, Sarah, for showing us 5 people that changed the world. I learned a little bit about Malala myself, and you too, kids, can change the world, so don't forget. On behalf of everyone here at FSD TV, my name is Mark Sonny, and we'll be back again tomorrow.